what's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new AYA Neo Geek 1S. Now, if you're not familiar with this device, we basically have the same design as the original AYA Neo Geek, but we've got an upgraded APU. Instead of using the older Ryzen 6800U, this has been upgraded to a Ryzen 7 7840U, and now we've got RDNA3 graphics here, which definitely does offer a nice little jump in performance. AYA Neo is offering a few different SKUs when it comes to the new Geek 1S, but this one here is the base model. We've got 16 gigabytes of RAM, a 512 gigabyte M.2 SSD, and an 800p display. You can also opt to get one with a 1200p display, more RAM, more storage if you wanted to, but I really wanted to take a look at the base cheapest version they offer. And so far, it's turning out to be a great handheld, but I've always been a big fan of the Geek series since the 6800U version came out last year. It's very comfortable to hold on to. We've got lots of bells and whistles, like the Hall-based analog sticks and triggers here, dual X-axis linear motors for some good haptics here, dual stereo speakers, USB 4, and one of my favorite things with these new AYA Neo devices is the D-pad. It is the best D-pad in my opinion on the market right now. Ever since they launched the AYA Neo 2, this has been my go-to for fighting games and even platformers. And like I mentioned, we do have those Hall-based triggers around back, so they are linear, great for racing games, and we've got a lot of throw here. And those full-size Hall-based analog sticks feel absolutely amazing in these devices. Now when it comes to the button layout, we've got the same basic design, A, B, X, Y, that Hall-based analog stick, and of course our AYA Neo button, which is going to bring up AYA Space. And by the way, I do have early access to AYA Space 2. We'll be taking a look at that in just a second. But over on the left-hand side, we've got that awesome D-pad, another Hall-based analog stick, and our start and select buttons are over here also. This does support a micro SD card down here. We've also got one USB 4 port, and up top we've got another USB 4 port and a USB Type-C 3.2 port. So in total, 3 USB-Cs, but only 2 of them are USB 4. And of course, when it comes to the specs, this is utilizing the new AMD Ryzen 7 7840U. We've got 8 Zen 4 cores and 16 threads. It's got a base clock of 3.3 GHz and a max boost up to 5.1. The built-in Radeon 780M iGPU. It's based on RDNA3. We've got 12 CUs and it'll run up to 2700 MHz with this chip. You can pick this up in a couple different variants. We can go with 16 gigabytes of RAM up to 32. It is using LPDDR5X at 6400 MHz right now in this unit. On their website, it's listed as 7500 MHz and 6400 MHz in compatibility mode. Right now, this is running at 64. They offer this with a 512 or a 2TB M.2 2280 NVMe SSD. You could upgrade this if you wanted to go with the lower end version. We've got a 7-inch 800p IPS here, but they also offer a version with a 7-inch 1200p IPS. I went with the 800p, kind of the lowest end version they had, because I wanted to see how this thing performs. It's got Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, a 50.25 watt-hour battery with 65 watt quick charging capabilities. It weighs 672 grams, and I'm running Windows 11 Pro on this device right now. Overall, I've always been a big fan of the AYA Neo Geek design. Very comfortable to hang on to. You can reach all of these buttons very easily. Get up to the triggers, the shoulder buttons, analog sticks here feel great, and it just kind of cradles right in your hand, and that's what they intended with this design. Very snappy here with that new Ryzen 7000 series APU, and of course I thought it would be. We can take this TDP down to 5 watts, up to 25, and a little beyond if we want to. Auto mouse mode works great, so we can use that analog stick as our mouse cursor, our buttons as our left and right click, and of course we've got AYA Space, but remember I'm actually on an early version of AYA Space 2, so I do want to take a closer look at this because they've added quite a bit, and it does allow you to tune your AYA Neo device much further than you could with regular AYA Space. So what I'm going to do here is plug this into my game capture so we can take a closer look. Okay, so I've just swapped over to my HDMI capture device, and pressing the AYA Neo button once is going to bring up AYA Space, and of course we're using AYA Space 2 here, and they've added a bunch to this new software. But if we hold it for about 3 seconds, it's going to bring us into AYA Space 2. Our home menu will display our games. We can add games, we can uninstall games, and from here we can actually set up different directories, or we can let it scan itself. I haven't done it just yet. Moving down a bit, we have a new section for recommended games. This is actually pretty cool. We can check out the game here. gives us a little bit of information. Cool little setup here. Again, this is where our installed games will be. It's going to scrape metadata and artwork for us. I haven't done it just yet. And our game gallery. Moving over to settings, we've got our account. We can sign in with our AYA Neo account. Performance. And from here, we've got our presets. So 3A game, normal game, retro game. Each one of these is going to change the TDP for us and the power policy. And we can also add our own. We can name it whatever we'd like. We can also set it up manually. So we've got our FPS lock over here, unlimited, 30, and anywhere in between 30 to 60 FPS. We can lock it with this profile here, which is really cool. Awesome new addition. Our TDP limit, we can go up to 25 watts right now in AYA Space 2, but we also have a new mode, Smart TDP mode. Now this is something that I've been messing around with quite a bit on the Geek 1S, and I noticed that this particular device goes up to 28 watts from AYA Space 2, but remember, you could use a third-party app to go higher if you need it. And in due time, this will be adjusted for each of their handhelds they have, but this is pretty cool. But I'm going to not accept it right now. We're just going to be at 25 watts. Fan configuration. We've got full control over the fan. We can go software controlled or hardware controlled. When we're in software controlled mode, we can fully adjust the fan curve here. We can go for ladder mode or we can go for linear mode. Really up to you. Kind of don't like those steps there, so I go with ladder mode. But I've noticed that even with auto TDP on, the fan curve they have here stays pretty quiet and definitely keeps it cool enough. CPU clock lock, GPU clock lock, and CPU turbo. We can turn this on or off. Overall, I really do like the new design of AYA Space 2. They've added a lot of new features here, especially when it comes to customizing your power profiles and things like that. They're definitely on the right track. But there's a lot more that this offers. Built-in monitor. You will need to install Riva Tuner, but from here we can turn it on. And this is going to give us our on-screen FPS display. It's going to give us our clock, temperature, fan speed, and everything like that. So you don't have to manually set it up if you don't want to. Startup and optimization. We've got our Bluetooth control, network control. We can customize this. It's got a light and a dark theme, plus we can change the text color and everything like that, really kind of making it your own. General, we can change the language and server. Windows, controller, and this is where you can really customize all of the built-in controls here. Our quick open buttons can also be programmed. Button mapping, RGB light control, and we can still go through and change each individual joystick LED here to the color we want. From within here, we can set the dead zones on the analog sticks and the triggers. We can change the sensitivity. Really, there's a lot that's gone into AYA Space 2, and like I mentioned, this is kind of early access right now. A lot more will be added down the road. So yeah, really like what they're doing here with AYA Space 2, but you know, one of the big reasons we get these handhelds in the first place is to game on them. And the first thing I wanted to take a look at were some benchmarks, then we'll get right into some gaming. All of these benchmarks are run at 28 watts, and first up we've got Geekbench 6, single core 2343, multi 8791. Now we know for sure that the 7840U does have a lot more to offer at a higher wattage, but I wanted to keep it right there. Next on the list we've got 3D Mark Firestrike with a 7061. And finally, we've got Time Spy with a 3093. Now, these are definitely falling right in line with the 7840U handhelds on the market, especially at 28 watts with 6400 megatransfers per second RAM. Remember, this does have 75, but unfortunately, at the time of making this, it's set at 64. We could get some more out of this, and I'm sure we will with the BIOS update. But now it's time to jump into some real-world gaming. And first up, we've got Cyberpunk 2077. I'm at 28 watts, and I will take it down to 15 in just a second. We're at 800p low, and we can get an average of around 78 FPS. Looking pretty good here, but again, we're at 800p because we only have an 800p display. If you went with the upgraded version or the higher end version of the Geek 1S, you could go up to 1200p with all of these games. So that was at 28 watts. Now here we are at 15 watts. If you take a look at Afterburner, you can see we're right there. This does do over 60 at 15 watts, 800p low, but it does get really close to going under. And I did see it dip down to around 57 in one instance, but if we were to lock this up at 60 FPS, we could play through this all day at 15 watts. Of course, I had to test out Forza Horizon 5, and I'm using the AYA Space 2 25 watt preset. So we do have a little bit of a boost. You'll see it go up to 28. This is not the auto TDP right now. 800p high settings, and ray tracing is off in high settings here. That's the only thing I disabled. We got an average of 98 FPS. Of course, it's an easier game to run, especially on these APUs. Not exactly sure what they've done here to make this work so well on all of these RDNA3 and even RDNA2 iGPUs, but this is one of my favorite games, and I'm glad it works this well. The Last of Us Part 1 was another one I wanted to test here. We're at 28 watts, 800p, low, and you can see it's really struggling to keep over 60. Now indoors, we do get an average of around 73 FPS, but in this wide open area, which really isn't that wide open for this game, we're right there on the edge. We got an average of 58. At 15 watts, you're just not going to hit 60 FPS with it, but you can lock it down to 30 from the settings and play it at 15 if you wanted to. I just had to make sure that we could run OG Skyrim okay on this at 15 watts. It's only pulling around 14, as you can see from Afterburner. We're at high settings, locked right there at 60. So, these older games are going to function really well on the 7840U at 15 watts. Of course, source games, Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Left 4 Dead 2, you're not going to have an issue with those. And when it comes to indie games, we can actually take the wattage way down. I'm at 6 watts. As you can see, it's not quite pulling 6 watts with Shredder's Revenge. We're at 60 FPS, and something like Dead Cells does require 8. So these indie games do function really well, especially the 2D ones, at lower wattages. And the final thing I tested here was Horizon Zero Dawn. I just used the built-in benchmark, and I wasn't really impressed with the outcome of this. Even though we're at 28 watts, you can see right now we're up there in the 80s, 90s. And usually at this kind of wattage, we do kind of sit steady through there right at around 70 FPS. But at the end of this benchmark, we only had an average of 67 FPS. Now I'm not complaining here, but I usually do see much higher out of this game given how well optimized it's been from the developers for these iGPUs. I mean, I've just had really good luck with it. Okay, so when it comes down to my first impressions of the AYA Neo Geek 1S, I think we definitely have more power than the older 6800U version. We've got that same design, so we're kind of used to this with the AYA Neo Geek line. Very comfortable to hang on to. Awesome analog sticks, the best D-pad in my opinion. And when it comes to AYA Space 2, I think they can do a lot with the 7840U in this handheld gaming device. It does need more optimization specifically tailored to the 7000 series APU, but the version of AYA Space 2 that I'm using is very early, so I'm just waiting a couple more days and I will get some auto TDP testing out of the way. So if there's anything else you want to see running on the Geek 1S, just let me know in the comments below. I don't mind testing out more games. We could go with higher TDPs, lower TDPs, or we could go with a totally different operating system like SteamOS 3. It's really up to you, so let me know what you want to see running on this in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look at the AYA Neo Geek 1S. If you're interested in learning a little more, or maybe even backing the Indiegogo, I'll leave some links in the description. And like always, thanks for watching.